The sun hung directly overhead, a white-hot disk searing the dry earth. Sarah gripped the rough rope of her water jar so hard her knuckles turned white. She walked with her head down, eyes locked on the cracked dust beneath her feet. Every step was a calculation. She avoided the main path where the village women gathered. She chose noon, the hour when the heat drove everyone else into the shade of their homes. A sudden burst of laughter drifted from the village square, sharp and mocking. Sarah flinched, her breath hitching in her chest. She veered sharply off the beaten track, boots crunching through brittle scrub and loose shale. She pushed through the glare, sweat stinging her eyes, her pulse hammering against her ribs. She was a ghost in her own home, moving through the periphery to escape the whispers. The air shimmered, distorting the horizon into a haze of gold and gray. She reached the stone rim of the well, her chest heaving, her lungs burning from the exertion. She expected the silence of the desert to greet her. She expected to be alone. She set the jar down on the parched ground, the stone biting into her palms, and waited for her heart to slow, unaware that the isolation she had fought so hard to maintain was about to be shattered. Sarah looked up, expecting the well to be empty. Instead, a man sat in the narrow strip of shade cast by the stone structure. His presence was an intrusion. She froze, her hand hovering over the bucket, fingers twitching with the urge to grab the rope and turn back. She waited for him to look away, to pull his cloak tighter, or to shift his gaze to the horizon as every other man in the village did. He did none of these things. He sat with his hands resting on his knees, his posture relaxed, his face turned directly toward her. His eyes were steady, calm, and entirely devoid of the judgment she had memorized over the years. She stood paralyzed, the heat of the sun suddenly secondary to the weight of his attention. She tried to lower her head, to slip back into the familiar role of the ghost. The silence between them stretched, thick and heavy. She was not being ignored. She was not being dismissed. She was being seen, and the realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her breath caught in her throat. The protective shell began to crack. The silence of the desert deepened, pressing against her ears like water. Sarah felt the air grow thin. Every failure of her life, every whispered judgment from the village, every marriage that had ended in ruin, rose to the surface of her mind. She felt exposed, as if the man were reading the history of her life written in the dust at her feet. Her pulse thrummed in her fingertips. She wanted to turn, to sprint back into the safety of the heat, to disappear into the scrub where no one could track her. But her feet remained planted. She tried to raise a hand to shield her face, to hide the shame she knew was etched into her features, yet her arm would not move. His gaze was a tether. It did not probe or demand. It simply rested upon her, stripping away the layers of ghost-like existence she had cultivated for years, the secrets she had buried in the dark. The shame she carried like a stone in her chest felt suddenly light, then terrifyingly visible. The tension in her shoulders reached a breaking point, a tremor running through her hands, as she realized she could no longer hide from the truth reflected in his eyes. The man leaned forward. The movement was slight, yet it shifted the entire atmosphere of the well. He spoke, and his voice cut through the shimmering heat with a clarity that made her skin prickle. "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink," he said, "you would ask him and he would give you living water." Sarah blinked. The words hung in the dry air, defying the logic of the desert. She looked at the empty bucket, then back at his face. She expected a demand for service, a critique of her presence, or a lecture on her failures. Instead, she heard an offer of something she had never dared to name, the shame that had been her constant companion for years. The heavy, suffocating weight she carried through the village suddenly felt hollow. She stood rigid, her knuckles still white against the rope, but the tremor in her hands slowed. She was being seen, not as a collection of mistakes, but as a person worthy of an invitation. The realization hit her with the force of a physical impact, grounding her feet firmly into the dust. For the first time in a lifetime of hiding, the urge to run died away. Sarah loosened her grip on the rough rope. The jar slipped from her fingers, hitting the stone rim with a dull, final thud. She did not reach for it. She did not look at the water she had come to draw. The sun still beat down on the dry earth, but the heat no longer felt like a burden. It was simply the air around her. She stood straight, her shoulders dropping, the tension of 1,000 hidden days draining away into the dust. The village was a world away, a place of whispers she no longer needed to fear. She looked at the man by the well, seeing not a stranger, but the end of her long, lonely search. She was found. The silence of the desert was no longer an empty void. It was a space where she was finally, truly heard. She took a step toward him, leaving the jar behind, and for the first time in her life, she was not alone.